The Hard Rock Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence here on the Hard Rock Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. It is the music of May the 22nd this week on the show. Episode number 119 of the Hard Rock Empire as of this week. And we're going to get to some great music. We're going to talk about a big concert we went to. We're going to start off with a few announcements about the future of this show as far as what's going to happen with it. You can actually see it on the screen if you are watching on Twitch or on YouTube. We'll get to all that in just a moment. But a really good week in music, and we're here to talk about it for the next 45 minutes to an hour or so. So glad to have you along with us on Twitch and on YouTube. Joining me in studio, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. It's been a week, man. It has been a week. Got Friday off, which was nice after the traveling on the rest of the week.
Yeah.
Had the concert Friday night, which was fantastic. A lot of music this week, but we got a lot going on, a lot of things coming up, and I'm excited.
Yeah, the one thing we do here is, and we've done since we started this a couple of years ago, is try to just kind of figure out what's the best way to get as many people involved, what's the best way to bring our content to you, our faithful listeners. And we do have a core of very faithful listeners, so we're very grateful to those who tune in, whether it's live or whether it's on our VODs. We're very grateful. And so along those lines, we want to try to continue to find a way to deliver it the best way possible. And one thing we're going to do starting July the 6th is this show's moving back to Mondays, which is where it began. Music Mondays was the original name of this show, and we're going to move back to Mondays at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, and it will be on YouTube only starting on July the 6th. So you see our YouTube page. Basically, we're going to go back to taping it in advance just to kind of make it a little more polished and also give us a little more flexibility as far as when our schedules make it a little more difficult to get together and record. We can kind of move it around a little bit without moving it around for the listener. And honestly, most of our listens to our podcast have been on YouTube. So it really made a lot of sense to keep it on YouTube, to kind of set a set time every week that you can tune in and watch it live, so to speak, or you can catch it on the VOD. So that'll be coming up in 3 weeks. So we wanted to kind of give everybody a few weeks head start to let them know that, hey, this is going to be happening starting July the 6th, which is Mike's birthday. That was completely coincidental.
Crazy.
But that will be a change, at least for a while going forward. We'll see how that goes. But if you do catch us on the VOD or you catch us on YouTube, really not a whole lot is changing other than you're going to see this go live on Mondays. And then if you're on Twitch, we won't have it on Twitch anymore. So honestly, the reality to Twitch is, and it's not just our Twitch. I want to make that clear because we're very grateful for what support we do get on Twitch. But I think the one thing I've noticed from watching other streamers that are people who average between maybe 1,000 and 2,000 viewers live when they're on is they all kind of say, I wish I hadn't gotten in a position where I have to run ads because honestly, I don't make any money off of them. And it's like, if a streamer who's got 2,000 people watching is not making money off of ads, then our stream is probably not going to make any money off of ads either. So rather than leaving it on this format and having to hit you with ads a couple times an hour and maybe just irritating people and making them go away, we put it on YouTube. And if you've got premium or other means, sail the high seas to make that work, you can get it without ads and you don't have to worry about that. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And we're not abandoning Twitch. We're going to be doing kind of a little more of a free-flowing Twitch streams. We'll try to go live once a week for a certain amount of time. And basically, rather than branding it as a show, we're just going to talk about all the things that we talk about. We've got some ideas for that. That'll be starting soon. But I think that's kind of the way to go. The goal is, again, to make it so everybody can get involved, but also keep our Twitch streams for people who are here with us on Twitch, so we're not running away from that. But overall, I think, as we look at it, I think these are good changes. And I think it's going to make things better for the listener and better for us. And I think in the end, that's really the goal of all this.
Yeah, I don't think talking about new music is necessarily something that's so time sensitive that we need to run it live. Just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, if we can get on once a week or so and just talk about what's going on and everything, I think that's more relevant, more pertinent to the moment, and makes for better live content.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And let's be fair. I mean, we're doing the music about 3 weeks in arrears anyway. So,
Yeah.
if it really was time sensitive, we would be several weeks farther ahead. But we do this to just kind of make it so we know we can find everything. And if an album gets pushed back or something happens with it, generally we're going to know by the time we actually get around to talking about the music from that given week. So I think it'll be good. Again, Monday, July the 6th, that's when you will catch the Hard Rock Empire, not live, but presumably live, fake live on YouTube with a premiere at 7 o'clock Eastern time. And then, of course, you'll be able to watch it on demand just like you've watched it all along. So we're looking forward to that. Other news, I guess, if we want to get to kind of where we were this week, we mentioned last week that we had a concert coming up, and we did go to that concert on Friday night, and we have the souvenirs to show for it. But overall, first time I've been to the Phrase Pavilion in probably more than a quarter century.
Might be the first time I've ever been there. I honestly don't know.
Was really impressed with the venue, and obviously we had Warrant, we had FireHouse, and we had BulletBoys, and let you give your thoughts first, but overall, just as a general thought before we jump into detail, I had a great time. It was a great show.
Yeah, I was really impressed. And I talk about it from time to time that I remember when, again, being younger, I didn't get into these bands when they were necessarily relevant. But in my mind, I used to think that meant they were past their prime. So when I was seeing bands from this era in like the early 2000s, I was surprised how good they sounded, and they were still relatively young.
Yes.
Fast forward to 2026, and I'm no longer young, so they certainly are not either. But man, all three bands delivered. You had the BulletBoys, who managed to put back together their classic lineup. I guess they had their prior reunion kind of blew up in a pretty ugly way back in 2022, but by the end of last year, they were able to kind of put it back together, and it's great to see that when you consider who they're touring with, where it's like, we're lucky because we can still do this.
Yeah.
Like, you have the other two bands in, like, very similar yet very different positions, where you had FireHouse, unfortunately, losing CJ Snare a year or two ago. Otherwise, we're running on all cylinders up until he got sick. And then, obviously, Warrant, where you had Janie Lane being kind of one of the earliest lead vocalist from that era to pass on, and now Robert Mason's been singing for them for 18 years and they still sound great. But it's just both those bands doing really touching tributes to their lead singers, and you just never know.
You don't. And my thoughts starting with BulletBoys is, admittedly, they were the band I probably knew the least about. Smooth Up Enya is a song that I think you can't listen to, all the hair metal shows from back in the day, when TUE would run their block of hair metal, and you would always hear that song kind of on rotation.
Like
so
Big Hair Tuesday,
yeah,
or what was it, something like that?
I can't remember what it was. That's sad that I don't remember. It tells you
Wednesday, maybe it was Big Hair Wednesday.
Well, that was EBN, right? They ran like the hour during lunch. TUE had like the like at 10 o'clock every night. They ran like a block of hair music.
Yeah,
I can't remember what it was, but might still be doing it. In fact,
I'm going to have to look into that now.
That I listened to WTUE out of Dayton, but that was a song I knew. There were a couple others I kind of knew, but overall I was impressed. The lead singer had been sick, so he wasn't even sure that this date was even going to happen, and he powered through it and did really well. FireHouse is a band that tours this area a lot, and now that I have seen them with their new lead singer, a young guy who had won a golden ticket with American Idol and just absolutely belts it out, I would not hesitate at all to go see them again if they're anywhere in this area. They were really good. And then, like you said, Warrant, just really, really talented, really good. Warrant, those are bands that I think are criminally underrated.
Yeah.
Musicianship wise, and we talk about it a lot about that, that era of music that, especially bands that maybe didn't have a big album till the early 90s. You were already on borrowed time at that point, with grunge coming right around the corner, and just way more talented than they ever got credit for. And you can see it now even more so that these guys are still out there and they still sound amazing, and you can still see the musicianship. And honestly, I knew it was going to be a good show. Ticket prices were really
amazing.
Yeah. We got in for a little over $50. It was absolutely worth it. Would have paid double that to see that show. Thumbs up to those guys. I thought that was just outstanding work by them.
Yeah, we talk about it from time to time because of the music we do talk about. It's criminal how these bands were treated in the early 90s. I understand the industry wanted to move on and they found their next thing they could market in the grunge movement, but there was no reason to fully drop support of what these guys were doing because, you look at FireHouse, they started in 1990 as far as, releasing albums. I didn't give them much time. And I also think a band like BulletBoys probably could have had a few more like really big hits in them. But, all music videos are inherently cheesy. So to judge them based on that or to suggest that because of the subject matter of the songs, they were somehow less respectable, less legitimate than what came after them is just brutal. And you see them live and their stuff holds up really, really well, even in 2026.
Yeah, really, really impressed overall. I thought it was a great show. Would definitely go see those guys again. A couple of I think BulletBoys are coming back to Ohio soon. I think they're going to be in Pickering. Was it them that were going to be in Pickerington, I think, coming up in July. So that's an opportunity if you're in Ohio to see them. Warrant and FireHouse are touring. FireHouse, like I said, they come in Ohio a lot. They've been even closer than Phrase to us as far as city-wise. So if you're a fan of that music and you haven't seen those bands recently or at all, I can't really recommend them enough. I think you're going to absolutely get your money's worth, and I'm excited to see them out there continuing to do it, and hopefully they all stay healthy and can do it for as long as they want to do it because live music is the best, and those guys really killed it.
Yeah, and in a day where ticket prices are ridiculous, they aren't selling. I mean, shows are being canceled. For a show like that, $50, that is... You're not going to get a better deal than that.
You're not. And one thing I will point out that's kind of unrelated to this concert, but maybe important is if you hear a show's advertised for your city, like you should definitely go online and see what ticket prices are because we looked up a couple of other shows that we thought might be a little pricier, and they turned out to have a pretty reasonable ticket price as well. So I don't know if that's a sign that the industry is maybe backing off on some of these higher ticket prices or that some of these bands that have been around a while kind of know, hey, things are tough. Let's make sure we price this so people will actually show up. But
a few 90s acts that we looked up really
in that same range.
Yeah, and if you're of our age and that stuff triggers some nostalgia for you, check it out.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always encouraging when we go to these shows to see some young people there, you know, probably dragged along by their parents or
grandparents,
and obviously the American Idol guy for FireHouse probably brings some younger fans as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't watch the show, so I don't know how long he stayed on there to kind of build a following, but that's certainly possible.
But and you said he did a Dawkins song for his
audition.
Yeah. So
I mean, that's
probably meant he was never going to win American Idol, but certainly has set him up for a great metal career. And like I said the other night on the way home, if FireHouse at some point decides not to tour anymore, he should just pick up the phone and call Frontiers Records and say, hey, like I'm your new guy. Put me out there, and if we get some band back together that needs a vocalist, and we'll do it. But highly recommended. Really great stuff. Kudos to those bands. Hope they keep rocking out there, and definitely check them out if they are in your vicinity anytime in the near future. On top of that, it's time to get to the music.
Yeah.
And what was a very solid week in music. Of course, each and every week, Mike will go through and he will put together a playlist of music for a given date. The given date in this case is May the 22nd. And we are pasting, I say we as in me, are pasting in the chat the playlist that Mike has put together.
Copy and pasting is really a one-person job.
It really is. Sometimes it's hard to do while you're talking and making sure you don't mess it up, but sometimes I manage to do that without messing it up. It is in both the chats now. Definitely check the playlist out. I always tell you that every week because there is stuff in here that I think people would consider to be really good that maybe just didn't fall into what we were looking for genre-wise. So I can't encourage you enough to check out the playlist. If you're watching on the YouTube VOD or when we move to YouTube, that'll pop up at the top of the screen as a card. So you'll see when we start talking about check the playlist, you'll see it on there. I'll try to throw a link in the description as well. so you can check it out at any point. But again, I overall thought it was a really solid week in music. And before we get to the stuff that we did pick, I think there was a lot of stuff that we didn't pick that was definitely worth a mention. So, Mike, what do we have this week?
Yeah, kind of starting off with our major releases. We have the 9th studio album from Armored Saint. Emotion Factory Reset is the name of the album. Of course, they're LA-based metal legends. I listened to it. I enjoyed it. A reviewer I saw kind of said it was a step back from their prior album. I don't know, but I enjoyed it. I think John Bush is one of the best vocalists out of that scene, still is, so he's going to make it better. And, if you're a fan, definitely check it out. Dimmu Borgir released their 10th studio album. The Norwegian symphonic black metal band released Grand Serpent Rising. I mean, if you're into Norwegian symphonic black metal bands, you can't do much better than Dimmu Borgir.
Yeah, for sure.
They definitely have a sound. It's impressive. Mott released the album Best Is Yet to Come. Mott is a Colorado multi-instrumentalist. His name's Martin Epp. He put together this star-studded project around the time of COVID that's now seeing the light of day. A lot of crazy guest musicians on it. Chaz West, Jeff Scott Soto, Phil X, Derek Sherinian, Matt Starr, among others. We also had Serpent from Eden releasing an album featuring Nick Menza. It's a band featuring John Goodwin, Darwin Ballard, Paulie Infantino, James Yokoi, Chris Tracy. These recordings feature late former Megadeth drummer Nick Menza, along with other special guests Chris Poland and David Ellefson. What I heard of that was really cool. Apparently, it's unreleased material that has Menza on it, and it's kind of honoring the 10-year anniversary of his passing. Those were kind of the main new releases that I did not pick, but I enjoyed. Going into re-releases and box sets, we got 3 from At the Gates, their first 3 albums. The Red in the Sky Is Ours, With Fear I Kiss the Burning Darkness, and Terminal Spirit Disease. They are the Swedish melodic death metal pioneers. Their albums are being remastered and re-released through Peaceville Records, so check that out. And finally, Fireball Ministry is re-releasing their second album, The Second Great Awakening. That's a band originally from Cincinnati. Their third album, Their Rock Is Not Our Rock, gained some traction back in the day. A song from that album, The Broken, was featured on WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2006 on the PS2. So, check that out.
Nice. Just a few notes. I want to go back and listen to the Armored Saint album. I knew that with them being kind of a big-name band, we probably wouldn't pick that one necessarily for the podcast, but what I liked, I listened to the track on the playlist, really dug that. I'm sure it's going to, like you said, John Bush is great. Like that album can't not be good. And it's, fair to say if you want to compare it album to album, but I think every album is kind of its own thing. And so definitely excited to check that out. If you're a fan of melodic and power metal, there was a lot of stuff on here this week. I dug what I heard of Boys from Heaven with The Wanderer from Frontiers. Got to listen a little bit of the Dan Byrne album. It's not really my style, but you could tell he was really good. Like, check it out if you're a fan of kind of more of the solo type melodic rock, maybe a little more like classic rock, I think, than maybe some of this more metal-driven AOR. But it was solid. Embrace of Souls with the Battle of the Dead, I thought had some promise. I didn't get all the way through that.
That was a good one.
And Fatal Vision's 4 Sides to Every Story, what I've heard of that was really solid as well. So in addition to the stuff Mike mentioned. And Mott, I was going to mention, I kind of wondered if it was a COVID project, because if you watch the video, they're all like clearly
zooming in, like
they're superimposed, but they clearly aren't in the same room. So it felt it was kind of like a throwback where everybody was recording music during COVID.
Well, it was like they were all doing it over like Zoom calls.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. But it was good. And again, we're not going to relitigate last week's argument, but I will say there were a lot of really good music videos this week where it was just the band's playing, or it was something like that where they clear
That's all you got to do.
It's all you got to do. Like you don't have to break out the AI. You don't have to feed it into Claude. You can just do something like that, and man, that gets it done. And so I just wanted to say kudos to some of the music videos I saw this week, even the stuff maybe I wouldn't pick. I thought there was a lot of creativity, which is always great to see. But alas, there can only be 2, one for each of us, so it is time to get to the picks for this weekend. This is the music of May the 22nd, and as always, Mike will kick us off. So, Mike, got a really good choice this week. Actually, this was an interesting week because it's 4 bands that we're going to talk about that we have talked about at some point to varying degrees on this podcast. So that was kind of an interesting twist, as it turns out. But what do you got for us this week?
Yeah, so starting us off, we are looking at the newest EP from an Italian melodic power / folk metal band. Talked about them about a little over a year ago in reference to their last album, Reader of the Runes, Luna. But today we're talking about their most current work, an EP. It is Elvenking, and the EP is Rites of Disclosure.
This was really good. I really don't know how I kind of missed it on the playlist. I didn't mark it, and then when I went back and listened, I should have actually listened to this from the get-go. Not surprised these guys are coming around again, but really, really good stuff.
Yeah, the second I saw their name, I'm like, wait, I know these guys. I'm sure I picked them at some point in time, and man, this EP is, a good mix of original stuff and covers, and definitely worth a listen. According to their website, this EP serves as the epilogue to the Reader of the Runes era, which was a multi-album thing they had going on. The band members go by pseudonyms. They are Idon on guitars, harsh vocals, and keyboards, Domna on vocals, lead, Lethian on violin, Simone on drums, Jakob on bass, and Headmat on guitars.
Okay.
Yeah. As I was going through listening to it on YouTube Music, it was brought to my attention through Metal Archive that I didn't have all the tracks, apparently. The EP has a digital and a physical version. The physical has 4 additional tracks, including 2 more original songs, The Moon and Magic and Ethel, and 2 more cover tracks, No Prayer for the Dying, Iron Maiden cover, and Prime Evil Venom cover. Definitely makes me want to get a hold of the physical. I definitely want to hear the Iron Maiden cover. These guys do everything so well. Like the riff at the beginning of Blizzards of Anger has this retro feel to it. Then you got the riffs and the guitar melodies just being really cool. You get the dual style vocals. The clean comes in at first, then the harsh picks up, and it fits the music so well, and they do it all really well. You got power metal elements along with folk metal, just a touch of death metal. If you like heavy music, it would be hard to not find something you enjoy about this. Mm-hmm. On the digital version of the album, you do get the original tracks Blizzards of Anger, Rite of Passage, and The Past is Forever, as well as the cover tracks Arrival, King Diamond cover, Children of Decadence, Children of Bodom cover, Man of Iron from Bathory, and Salt on the Earth, Another Man's Poison by Skyclad. The King Diamond cover being being the one on the digital version that I'm most familiar with. Tremendous cover. They nailed it.
Well, you can tell they nailed it because I wasn't familiar with the song. But I immediately posted in the Discord, like, man, they decided to go like King Diamond on this one, and then you mentioned it was a cover. Like
they sure did.
Hey, well, they nailed it because that's exactly what it reminded me of.
Yeah, I mean, King Diamond's vocal delivery and just the duality of his like kind of singing voice and ridiculous falsetto, which I love, by the way.
Yes.
It's unique. No one else does that. And I would even argue, like, the guitar at the beginning of the song, you're like, wait, that's King Diamond. That's Andy LaRocque. Like, it's got a distinct sound to it. And, yeah, it's just great cover, great album, great EP. Listen to the whole thing. But as far as what we're listening to, we're going to check out, we're going to listen to the first track, Blizzards of Anger.
Check these guys out. It's Elvenking coming back once again with Rites of Disclosure. A couple of EPs on the list this week. This is the opening track to that, Blizzards of Anger. Let's check that out now.
Oh, blizzards, northern winds, please bring yells of anger to the sea. Tempest, fog, and mist arise. The final day to die, where cliffs the stars, dictating displeasing words to the enemies of our domain. These Jews, these Sikhs, these swans are whole.
Yeah, it's really good. I think, listening to that first track, again, as we've talked about on the podcast a lot, harsh vocals aren't always up my alley, but they did it well. That's usually a good sign for me. Like if a band really kind of nails it in a way that it adds a weight to the song without being annoying or irritating to listen to. I feel like they're going to nail it. And again, the King Diamond cover was so good, and it's like, okay, if you can do King Diamond and you don't just totally make a mess of it,
Yeah.
like you've really got talent. And those guys absolutely knocked it out of the park. For an EP, I thought this was really, really good.
Yeah, the dual vocals, when it's done right, it almost feels like two separate instruments, but still fit within that same song. Like the clean vocals and the harsh vocals, they find their place, and I think these guys do it great.
Yeah, really, really impressive stuff from these guys. Definitely encourage you to check those guys out. One of 2 EPs on the agenda for this week. We'll get to the second one now, and it is another band that we have talked about. But the reason we talked about them is things have kind of changed a little bit with these guys. This is the new EP from the Italian band Vision Divine, and it is a Clockwork Reverie. We talked about these guys in the vault when I was going through every week and going through the list of Frontiers Records bands. Specifically talked about their album 9 Degrees West of the Moon from 2009. The band originally formed in 1998. This is an EP that follows their 2024 album Blood and Angels' Tears. I had actually had in my notes for when I talked about the band in the vault, you know, they had a couple of their past members come back, and I kind of wondered if they were lining up for a new album. We didn't get a full album, but we did get an EP. It's really solid. This marks the return of the lineup of Mikhail Lupi on vocals and Oleg Smirnov on keyboards, joining Olaf Thorson on guitars, Andrea Torricini on bass, and Matt Peruzzi on drums. It originally was a solo project of Thorson. Fabio Leone joined him initially to handle the singing. It basically became Vision Divine. This EP is 4 new songs along with 3 re-recorded songs, one off of each of the albums that Lupi had originally sang on. As some of the reviewers, I saw a review from My Global Mind saying that if you're a fan of the band from the 2004 to 2007 era, you're going to really be pleased with the sound here. Not too surprising because this is really, really good. After a short intro track, they jump in with 3 outstanding new full-length tracks. It's definitely heavier than just melodic metal. There's definitely some power metal elements to this, and I think that's what kind of took this a little bit above some of the more melodic stuff that was on the playlist this week. I think if you're a fan of music that does kind of walk that line between good melodies and good harmonies and kind of the driving power metal sound, I think you're going to find something you really like here. I'm excited to think that these guys could potentially get a full album going at some point. Really great to see this lineup together and excited to see where they go from here. Standout tracks, obviously it's an EP. It's 7 songs in 34 minutes. You should listen to the whole thing. The new tracks are all really good. The one we're going to listen to is the title track to the album, A Clockwork Reverie. Let's check this out. This is Vision Divine returning once again with A Clockwork Reverie. This is the title track and the second track, although it is the first full-length track on the album. It's track number 2. Let's check this out now.
All deep inside, left in a lonely place, an ageless room. A sickness dust and rust are coming out. The flowing of time. In the time, no echo spread. We try to light its decayed. Acid dust that silent place. Dreams came to life. A reverie of golden grace. Broken lies of time that can't be lost. Wouldn't flow, holding on. Love unclaimed for you. Skies that never grew songs. Even wings for the final ride.
One thing I want to shout out, I mentioned the change, and then I didn't mention what the change is. These guys are no longer with Frontiers. They have jumped over to Scarlet Records, so kudos to Scarlet Records for bringing these guys on board and getting them started on something new there. So I think really excited for what happens with this band going forward. Really enjoyed this EP. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, I didn't get to listen to this whole album, unfortunately. I definitely want to go back and hit it, but what was on the playlist and what we heard here, just tremendous. I mean, great blend of heaviness, but just so melodic at the same time. I'm a fan.
Yeah, really, really dug this. I thought it was really good stuff from them. Two really good EPs this week on the list, and sometimes it works out that way that the EPs end up being really strong. And excited for both of those bands to continue to put out great stuff. And again, check out the playlist. There's a lot of really good stuff this week. If you're watching us on Twitch, we do have to run a 90-second ad at this point. You won't miss anything. We'll chat a little bit during the ad break, but we'll come back with The Vault, where Mike and I will talk about a couple of classic albums you need to check out. But again, you won't miss a thing, so if you can stay and watch the ads, we would appreciate it. It does help us, even if it's just a little bit of ad revenue. If you're subscribed, obviously you won't get any ads. Or if you're on YouTube, you'll hear us ramble for about 90 seconds until Twitch comes back from ads, and then we'll get to The Vault coming up to wrap up the program. So waiting for the ads to fire. They are underway. Yeah, really good week. There was just a lot of stuff that, if you're really into melodic and power metal, it felt like there was just a lot of options from a lot of different labels, which to me is one of the more encouraging things we've seen over the last maybe 6 months or so, is either new labels or maybe labels that have been a little bit under the radar really starting to release good stuff almost, if not weekly, at least a couple of times a month.
Yeah, I don't know if the farther we move along doing this, if it just so happens we're at a point where labels are starting to kind of figure out the formula to promote these bands without much overhead, because it has to make sense for them too. But you're seeing a lot more that aren't self-produced, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think any kind of backing. I mean, because obviously the backing is always going to be a little bit limited for the music we listen to, but any kind of backing and support is just a huge help to these bands, whether it's in the production of the albums, whether it's the promotion of the albums. Anything to get this out in front of more people. And some of these bands are touring. I think, was it Elvenking that's touring in North America this summer? I can't remember.
Check.
I'll have to double check that real quick too, but I feel like they've got a couple of dates coming up in Ohio as well coming up. So some of these bands, even European bands, are out there. So, I definitely encourage you to check those guys out. If you can catch them live, as we've talked about, live music is definitely the way to go. Yeah, they've got North American tour, which starts on September the 10th in Atlanta at Prague Power Fest.
They touring with Hammerfall?
Yes, they are.
That's cool.
And somebody else who was blocked by the logo.
Could only partially see Hammerfall, but I was pretty sure that's what that said.
So they've got dates in Lakewood and Columbus, Ohio at the King of Clubs coming up in September. So great to see. Get out there and support live music. They're coming through Canada as well. Coming up in September. So if you're a fan of those guys and you liked what you heard on the podcast, definitely get out and see them live. Good stuff for sure. And we welcome you back if you're on Twitch watching ads. It's the Hard Rock Empire, as we are every Sunday night. But again, we'll be moving to Mondays. We'll be moving to YouTube only coming up on July the 6th. So make sure you mark your calendars. Join the Discord. It's pinned in both the chats. That's a good way to know when we're going to be on the air and when we'll be streaming on Twitch, because we will be doing kind of our variety hour. It could literally be anything. We might talk topics. We might game. We might just get on and ramble. Who knows what it's going to be, but we will be here on Twitch still, so we're not abandoning the platform. We're just moving the music to an area where we think it'll make a lot more sense. But again, that's coming up in 3 weeks, so make sure you're ready for that. But it is time to get into the vault, where Mike and I will each talk about a classic album you need to check out. Mike is running a couple of different gimmicks. He is continuing through the 70s at the moment, looking for some standout albums that maybe either flew under the radar or definitely need a little more of the spotlight. This is one that I honestly, I feel bad that I haven't listened to front to back. When you mentioned which one it was going to be, I'm like, yeah, I need to listen to this album. So I'm definitely curious to get your thoughts on it. But what do you have for the vault this week?
Yeah, so we are moving on to 1977, and man, huge debuts in 1977. I did not pick any of them, but there was a lot to pick from as far as if I did want to go that route. We had Cheap Trick with their self-titled debut, Foreigner with their self-titled debut, Bonnie Tyler, The World Starts Tonight, her debut album.
Nice.
We have the debut solo album from Peter Gabriel. We also have Ram Jam with their self-titled debut. Not one that I would have picked, but I thought it was noteworthy. George Thorogood and the Destroyers, self-titled debut.
If you're a fan of Southern rock, that's probably up your alley.
Yeah, and drinking and that stuff. Talking Heads, released Talking Heads 77 this year as well. And finally, Meatloaf released Bat Out of Hell. which would have been a good choice too.
In 77, I picked Styx's Grand Illusion, and which is obviously a really, really good album. Not a debut, but a really, really good album from those
Yeah, I
guys.
think it was like, what, their 5th or 6th or something
I
like
think
that.
so.
Major albums in 1977. You mentioned Styx's Grand Illusion. We also have Fleetwood Mac's Rumors.
Oh, yeah.
We have Rush's A Farewell to Kings.
Wow.
Queen's News of the World. And Electric Light Orchestra's Out of the Blue, which, had it not been a double album, I might have picked, because I noticed in the Wikipedia article, it mentioned how Axl Rose commented on how great that album was. And I thought that would have been an interesting thing to point out. But it was a double album, and I thought, man, let's save Electric Light Orchestra for another day. I'm still going to hit them at some point, but not this time.
I think noteworthy that I just saw an article that said Rush played A Farewell to Kings live in concert for the first time since 1979 at their LA shows. So those shows obviously real well received. I guess they played 4 completely different set lists every night. So, I mean, they can do that. Played 2112 in its entirety a couple different nights. But when you mentioned A Farewell to Kings, like, I remember they said that they just played that live for the first time in many, many years.
Rush is one of the few bands that could get away with playing something like 2112 in its entirety.
Yes.
Because
people are going to love it.
Yeah, it's an event for them. But, man, I remember the whole song was on one of the Guitar Hero games. And I was just like, man, halfway through this is just weird. Like,
yeah,
it's not bad. It's just kind of uneventful.
It is prog,
yeah.
for sure.
Oh, so anyway, what I ended up going with was the 5th studio album from the band Kansas. That album is Point of No Return.
Yeah, obviously I know the hits off of this, but I really do need to go back and give the whole thing a listen.
Yeah, absolutely. This album was certified 4 times platinum in 1995. The main core of the band Kansas stayed together throughout their first 8 albums, which spans 1974 to 1980. We were looking at Kerry Livgren on lead guitar and backing vocals, Dave Hope on bass and backing vocals, Phil Ehart on drums and percussion, Steve Walsh on vocals, keyboards, and percussion, Robbie Steinhardt on vocals, violin, viola, and cello, and Rich Williams on rhythm guitar and backing vocals. To this day, they still have Phil Ehart and Rich Williams in the band, 2 of the original members, which is pretty fantastic. Mm-hmm. Apparently, during the creation of this album, frontman Steve Walsh briefly left the band. By his own admission, he kind of became a prima donna and thought he would have some budding solo career. But thankfully, he came back because they still had some work to be done with him in the band. It's always interesting to read backstories to how songs were written. Dust in the Wind always seemed like a bit of an odd fit compared to the other hits of theirs that I knew, like kind of random. It doesn't sound like Carry On Wayward Son. Turns out Kerry Livgren wrote the song while doing finger exercises to learn finger picking on the guitar. His wife heard him and mentioned that the melody he was playing sounded good and should have lyrics. And he wasn't sure about it, but he played it for the band and ended up being a huge hit, so it worked out pretty well. The 3rd single from the album, Portrait He Knew, was written about Albert Einstein. Livgren would eventually write an updated version of that for his band AD called Prime Mover, only instead of Einstein, it would be about Jesus.
Okay.
Two pretty important people, just saying.
Sure.
There's still enough progressive influence on this album that I think would satiate the prog fan, despite the album being noted for shorter compositions and a bit more pop sensibility. Their instrument credits on Wikipedia would also speak to the prog chops, including vibraphone, clavinet, viola, and timpani. They would also include fictional instruments listed along with the real ones, including chain-driven gong, autogyro, Ronaldo whistling machine, and Peabody chromatic inverter. Clearly, these guys had a sense of humor. You have the shorter, more accessible singles on the album, Point of No Return, Portrait He Knew, Dust in the Wind. But for the prog fans, you also had some of the longer, more complex songs like Closet Chronicles, Lightning's Hand, and Hopelessly Human. Rolling Stone wasn't very kind to the album, saying that though the transition to shorter songs generally works, the lyrics are a wan and ridiculous rehash of the bargain basement exoticism employed by the British art rock crowd. Whatever that means.
Okay.
They did also say, though, that despite Kansas not having any virtuoso soloists, the band's ensemble playing is strong and purposeful. So even like their compliment was like, none of these guys are great, but they sound good together. So I thought that was kind of harsh. Like, there's no virtuoso in this band, but they work well together. Robert Taylor of AllMusic was a lot nicer, calling the album an essential classic rock and progressive rock recording. obviously you got the two really big hits, Point and Overturn, Dust in the Wind, but I enjoyed the whole album. It's got some wild progginess to it, and every now and then it kind of like veers off almost into like folk kind of rock. But you know, it's interesting to hear kind of like with what you're doing with Journey, the songs that you didn't know about.
Yeah.
And with Kansas, you know, I'm familiar with their hits, not the other tracks. So definitely one that's worth checking out.
Yeah, I definitely want to listen to it front to back. I always try to find something a little more off the beaten path when we do these vault picks. And it should be noted that the album was mixed and mastered by Jeff Glixman, who has mixed or mastered albums by Kansas, Magnum, Gary Moore, Yngwie Malmsteen, the Georgia Satellites, and Black Sabbath.
But not Ram Jam.
Not Ram Jam. He's done some stuff for ELO. He actually mastered one of Anthrax's greatest hits, Madhouse, the very best of Anthrax. Has continued to do stuff for Malmsteen and has continued to do stuff with Kansas really up till 2008's Kansas 2 for the Show, the 30th anniversary edition. So done some stuff with Glenn Hughes, Shadow Galleries, Room 5 or Room V. I'm
Room
not
5,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, he did the mastering on that. So, you know, it's always interesting to me when he did Blackmore's Nights, Under a Violent Moon. It's always interesting to me to see, you know, the guys who work behind the scenes and maybe don't always get the credit among casual fans, but it's like when you see the kind of bands that he's worked with and the kind of work he's done, it's like, well, you need somebody to master Kansas that really knows what they're doing and clearly, you know, producing them and mastering them, like he was able to take the magic that they could produce and really get it to come across in a recording. So always cool stuff.
Yeah.
But, you mentioned Journey and the stuff that we don't know. Like, boy, are we getting to that this week. We are continuing through our run through the Journey albums. That is my vault selection for this week. And obviously I have a tier list. We'll put the updated tier list as of before this album up on the screen. And we still haven't found the best of the best yet, at least. And I may have to move the one that's there up if we don't find a best of the best, I guess, because something's got to be the best. And you got your greatest hits, but not quite the best. Probably will listen to on greatest hits only. Those first three albums all made excellent musicianship, but probably limited re-listens. And then I have the bottom category, probably didn't need to listen to this one. Like, we haven't had any like that yet. Hopefully we won't, but, you know, we got it on there. And didn't want to give it like an F tier because I'm sure there's going to be talent on the album. But this is one that maybe a lot of Journey fans didn't know about. So this was really interesting to me. I think a lot of people think that the band just kind of moved on after oops, and I just popped that off the screen. You know, obviously their previous album, Departure, I think people think it went from Departure to Captured. For a lot of fans, it did. But there was an album in between. In 1980, they were tasked to perform an album for a Japanese/French romantic fantasy film, and the film was Yume no Ato, which was directed by fashion designer Kenzo Takada. And they created this album, Dream After Dream, which was released in 1980. It was released on Columbia Records. It was the seventh album-length recording by the group. Honestly, the album overshadowed the film, which really got very little fame. The overall, there are 9 tracks on the album. There are only 3 tracks that have vocals: Destiny, Sandcastles, and Little Girl. Little Girl was later released as the B-side of Open Arms, so that's why it has like 600,000 plays on YouTube Music, because it clearly it was, if you had to pick a hit off of this album, that was definitely the one. As for the movie, evidently it was awful and a giant flop. So much so the director, and I think this is one of those things that it can only happen in Japan and probably only back in the 80s, decided he wanted to scrub from existence. So the full 101-minute cut of the movie, as well as the original French language audio, has yet to be found and is considered lost media, according to the Lost Media Wiki. However, on February 19, 2022, a bootleg copy surfaced on YouTube after being found on a DVD-R, which the audio is dubbed in Japanese, and it is missing about 30 minutes worth of material. They believe it was sourced from Japanese television, as rumors had circulated for years that it had aired on TV in the past. Interesting stuff for sure. The band, as of this album, we had Steve Perry on lead vocals, Greg Rowley on backing and co-lead vocals, Neil Sean on lead guitar and backing vocals, Ross Valerie on bass guitar and vocals, and Steve Smith on drums and percussion. This is the true last album for Greg Rowley, and honestly, kind of a fitting way to go out because, boy, is this stuff out there. Like, it definitely feels, I would say, not just proggy, but almost like beautiful musicianship that goes even beyond rock music in a lot of cases outside of those 3 tracks, even in 2 of those 3 tracks, I think, that have vocals. The reviews, AllMusic gave it a 3 out of 5. AllMusic wrote, one of the most overlooked albums in Journey's catalog, is a fine example of Journey's underrated musicianship and recommended for devoted fans. Dave Marsh, normally an ardent detractor of the band, was even more enthusiastic, describing the album as, quote, the band's finest recording of the 80s.
Wow.
That tells you what he's going to think about these next albums coming up. A couple of users on AllMusic gave some interesting thoughts. One said, Journey's soundtrack for the Japanese movie Dream After Dream is much closer in spirit to the moody blues than any of the arena rock that redefined their style under Steve Perry's arrival. It's interesting but confusing return to a more progressive style dominated by pensive instrumentals. Little Girl and Destiny are the highlights, but hardly of the same caliber as the other 70s hits. Mellow, dreamy, and often dull was how they ruled it. Another user said, this is probably how the critics wanted Journey to sound all along. In truth, a progressive pop style is something that might have worn very well between 1975 and 1980, and Steve Perry arrived just a little sooner. Again, everybody should listen to this album. Even if you're a Journey fan, you've never heard this, you should put it on. I listened to it twice all the way through just to kind of absorb it. It's a trip. It's well performed. If you go to the Wikipedia page, there's a whole list of Japanese artists who performed like horns and things like that in the background. It's definitely not one I would listen to on the regular. The 3 vocal tracks are good, if not a little weird. Little Girl's really the breakout song here. And, of course, you can see why they added it to the B-side of Open Arms. Definitely encourage everybody to check this out. It's weird. It was fun. It's just different. But to get to the tier list, I actually did put it ahead of those 3 prog albums and put it into the probably will listen to hits on greatest hits only, because Little Girl's a good song. It shows up on some of the really extended greatest hits cuts. And to me, like the fact you had Steve Perry singing even on 3 tracks elevated it a little bit above those first 3 albums. But wow, that was an absolute trip that I was not expecting. Standout tracks are the 3 with vocals, Destiny, Sandcastles, and Little Girl. This is the first time I've ever listened to it as a Journey fan, and was just, I don't even know really how to describe my feelings after it, other than I'm glad I listened to it, and wouldn't listen to most of those tracks regularly, but it's really well done.
Yeah, I got to about 3 tracks into it before we started the show, so it wasn't that I didn't want to listen to more of it. I just ran out of time.
Yeah.
To me, it just sounded like a pretty cool film score.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't see anything necessarily bad about it. Again, there's no reason to believe that these guys aren't really good musicians.
Yeah.
And can compose something really cool given the opportunity. It's the balancing act, and it's not even fair to call it that, because it's suggesting that writing pop hits is somehow like dirty or wrong. But if you can write songs that millions of people love, you can probably also write something like this.
Yeah.
It is funny though when you think someone in Japan was like, I really want Journey to score my film.
Yeah.
And then over here it'd be like, if we can just get Journey to write a couple like #1 hits to promote this movie. It's a different approach as far as like what it means by getting Journey to do music for your movie.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's interesting. I'm sure the one thing it doesn't say in the wiki article is how that ever came about, like how they decided to get involved, what the director was looking forward to. Like, I have to assume the director was a fan of their early 70s stuff, so they really wanted that proggy musicianship sound. And again, as I just briefly touched on, but probably worth expanding upon, this really feels like the farewell to Greg Rowley that he deserved. That, not there's kind of debating stories, and time will probably never tell which is actually the truth as to how much Roley really wanted to go along with the new sound of the 80s and the more polished commercial sound. But there was no question the guy was really talented, and he feels like this is his way of kind of putting his flag in the ground and saying, this is what I kind of wanted Journey to be. I recognize it's not going to be that, but this is a chance for me to say goodbye by producing something like this.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's just nice to be able to show your detractors, like, no, we obviously have chops. You know that.
Yeah, and there will be plenty of detractors come out as we head into 2 weeks from now. Because if you are not a fan of their commercial sound, you are in trouble, because we are headed straight into that with Captured coming up as a live album coming up next week. And there's some really good stuff on there before we head to Escape, which is absolutely going to be their big breakthrough.
Yeah, looking at the after Captured, the run of the next 3 studio albums, it's amazing just how evenly distributed their hits are.
Yeah.
I was expecting to find one where it's like far and away this is the album, but you really don't.
Yeah, it's much more balanced. Like, they were clearly just making hits every year.
Which means it's really going to come down to the not hits to determine kind of what their strongest album is.
Like, who, it's the Iron Chef of Japanese, who's going to reign supreme in those 3 albums. Because you have to think, one of those 3 albums is going to be the best of the best on my list. And I honestly don't know which it's going to be. And you're 100% right. I think it's going to come down to the other tracks, and whichever one has a stronger kind of cast with those hits is the one that's going to be come out on top. But that'll be in 2 weeks. We'll get back talking about Journey, and excited to do so. But that is going to wrap things up for this edition of the Hard Rock Empire. Another reminder, and I'll be reminding you a lot over the next 3 weeks, we'll be moving to Mondays on YouTube starting July the 6th. So plan accordingly, and a good way to plan is to join our Discord for updates. Again, July 6th, back to Monday, 7 o'clock Eastern time. I'll be telling you nonstop for the next 3 weeks, so just want to make sure you are aware of that. Big thanks to Mike for all of his hard work on the podcast. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support, and a big thanks to you whenever and wherever you're listening to our show. We'll be back again next Sunday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time on Twitch and YouTube. The music of May the 29th will be coming up next week. Looking forward to that. Hopefully you are too. But that's going to wrap things up until next week. And for all of us here at the Nerdcast Empire, I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Hard Rock Empire.